Marriage is supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where two people build something lasting together, where trust isn't questioned but assumed, where the person sleeping beside you is your greatest ally. For 15 years, I believed I had that. I believed in the life Jessica and I created, in the mortgage we shared, in the college funds we'd started for our daughters, in every anniversary dinner and weekend getaway. I believed in the mundane beauty of our routine, coffee together before work, her laugh when I'd make terrible jokes, the way she'd rest her hand on my shoulder when passing behind my chair. I believed in all of it with the kind of certainty that makes you stop looking for cracks in the foundation. My name is Trevor Holloway, and I'm a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Nothing extraordinary about me, just a guy who worked hard, paid his bills on time, coached his daughter's soccer team on weekends, and loved his wife without reservation. Jessica worked as a marketing coordinator for a pharmaceutical company, a job she'd held for 8 years. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We had a nice 4-bedroom house in a good school district, 2 cars that were paid off, and enough left over for family vacations to the beach each summer. Our daughters, Emma and Lily, were 12 and 9 respectively, bright, funny kids who made every sacrifice worthwhile. Emma had just started middle school and was discovering her love for photography. Lily was still in that magical phase where she believed her parents could do no wrong. I lived for their smiles, their accomplishments, their terrible knock-knock jokes at the dinner table. Looking back now, I wonder how long I was living in a carefully constructed illusion. How many smiles were manufactured? How many "I love yous" were spoken out of habit rather than feeling? When did my wife stop being my partner and start being a stranger wearing a familiar face? These are questions that haunt me in the quiet hours, but they're not the story. The story is what happened when the illusion shattered, when I discovered that the life I'd been living was a performance, and I was the only one who didn't know I was in a show. This isn't a tale of redemption or healing. This isn't about finding myself or learning valuable life lessons. This is about what happens when the person you trust most in the world betrays that trust so completely that it rewrites your entire history. This is about the evidence I found, the confrontation that followed, and the systematic dismantling of everything I thought I knew. This is about revenge. Not the hot, impulsive kind, but the cold, calculated variety that comes from someone who's been pushed past their breaking point. I'm telling this story not because I'm proud of everything I did, but because it's real. It happened. And somewhere out there, someone else is living in the same illusion I was, trusting when they should be verifying, believing when they should be questioning. Maybe my story will open their eyes before it's too late. Or maybe it won't. Either way, this is what happened when my perfect marriage revealed itself to be a perfect lie. It started on a Tuesday in October, which seems fitting somehow. Not a Monday, because that would be too obvious, and not a Friday, because that would suggest the universe has a sense of dramatic timing. Just a regular Tuesday, the kind where you go through the motions because the week is already underway and the weekend is still too far away to get excited about. I'd left work early, around 3 in the afternoon, because a client meeting got canceled. The construction site we were supposed to inspect had flooding issues from overnight rain, so the whole thing got pushed to Thursday. My boss told me to just head home, enjoy the unexpected free time. I remember feeling pleased about it, thinking I'd surprise Jessica, maybe take her out for an early dinner before picking up the girls from their after-school programs. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Jessica's car was there, which surprised me slightly. She usually worked until 5:30, sometimes later if they had a campaign deadline approaching. I figured maybe she'd had the same kind of day I did, a canceled meeting, an unexpected break in the routine. I walked in through the front door, keys jingling as I tossed them into the bowl on the entry table. "Jess," I called out, "you home?" No answer. The living room was empty, kitchen clean. I noticed her purse on the counter, her phone plugged in beside it. That was unusual. Jessica was attached to her phone like it was a vital organ. She brought it everywhere, even to the bathroom. I heard something then, a sound from upstairs. Muffled. I couldn't quite make it out. My first thought was that she might be on a work call, using the landline in our bedroom. We still kept one, mostly out of habit. I climbed the stairs, my footsteps soft on the carpeted steps. The sound became clearer as I reached the landing. Voices. Jessica's voice, definitely. But there was something about the tone that seemed off. Strained, maybe. Breathless. Our bedroom door was closed, which was also unusual for a Tuesday afternoon. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, frozen in a moment that stretched far longer than the seconds it actually occupied. Behind that door, I could hear Jessica's voice. Not the calm, measured tone I'd heard across dinner tables for 15 years, but something urgent and hushed. There was a man's voice, too, lower, harder to make out. The rational part of my brain, the project manager who'd spent 2 decades calculating load-bearing capacities and material costs, told me exactly what I was about to find. But the husband, the father, the man who'd built his entire adult life on the assumption of mutual fidelity, resisted that conclusion with every fiber of his being. I turned the knob. The scene that greeted me wasn't the dramatic tableau I'd braced myself for. Jessica wasn't in bed with another man. She was sitting at the small desk we'd placed near the window, laptop open, papers spread across the surface. Across from her sat a man I'd never seen before, mid-30s, dark hair, expensive-looking suit, in the chair we'd bought for the room but rarely used. They both looked up as the door swung open. The man's expression shifted through surprise, calculation, and then a carefully manufactured friendliness in the space of a heartbeat. Jessica's face went pale. "Trevor," she said, standing quickly, "I didn't expect you home." "Clearly." I looked between them, my mind racing to reconcile what I was seeing with what I'd expected. "What's going on?" The man stood as well, extending his hand with practiced ease. "David Lawrence. I'm a colleague of Jessica's. We were just going over some marketing materials for the new product launch." I didn't shake his hand. I looked at my wife instead. "You're working from home now, without mentioning it?" "It was last minute," Jessica said, her voice finding its footing. "David needed some documents I had here, and it was easier to meet than trying to coordinate at the office." It was plausible. It was even reasonable. But something in the atmosphere of that room, the way they'd both tensed when I entered, the slight disarray of papers that didn't quite look like marketing materials, the fact that Jessica's phone sat downstairs instead of in her hand, told me this wasn't what it appeared to be. "What kind of documents?" I asked, moving further into the room. David, if that was even his real name, shifted slightly, positioning himself between me and the desk. "Proprietary information, actually. I'm sure you understand we can't discuss client details." I'd spent enough time in business meetings to recognize a deflection. I looked past him to the papers on the desk. What I could see didn't look like pharmaceutical marketing materials. They looked like forms, official forms with dense text and blank spaces for information. "Jessica," I said quietly, "what are you really doing?" My wife's face underwent a transformation I'd never witnessed before. The warmth drained from her features, replaced by something harder, more calculating. In that moment, looking at this woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years, I realized I was seeing her clearly for the first time. "I think you should leave, David," she said, not taking her eyes off me. "Are you sure?" He glanced between us, clearly weighing his options. "Yes, we'll finish this later." I stepped aside as he gathered a few papers from the desk, sliding them into a leather messenger bag. He moved past me without another word, his footsteps quick on the stairs. The front door opened and closed. Jessica and I stood in silence, the afternoon light streaming through the window between us. "How long?" I asked. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think this is about an affair? Isn't it? God, Trevor, you're so predictable." She sat back down at the desk, her posture relaxing now that we were alone. "This isn't about sex, it's about money." I felt the ground shift beneath me, my certainty crumbling. "What are you talking about? Do you know what I make at the pharmaceutical company after 8 years?" She didn't wait for me to answer. $62,000 a year. You make almost double that. We live comfortably, sure, but I'm always the one making less, always dependent on your income for the life we have. "We're married," I said, struggling to understand where this was going. "What's mine is yours. Until it isn't." She gestured at the papers on the desk. "I've been building something of my own. A consulting business, helping people navigate complex paperwork." I moved closer, looking at the forms spread across the surface. They were immigration documents, green card applications, work permits, visa renewals. "Since when do you know anything about immigration law?" "I don't need to be a lawyer. I just need to know more than the people who come to me for help." She met my eyes, defiant. "There are thousands of families in Charlotte who need assistance with paperwork. They don't speak English well, they don't understand the system, and they're willing to pay for someone who can guide them through it. And David, he has connections, access to resources that make the process smoother." The careful phrasing set off alarms in my head. "What kind of resources?" Jessica stood, closing the laptop. "I think we need to have a longer conversation about this, but not right now. I have a consultation in an hour." "A consultation? Where?" "At a family's home in East Charlotte. They're applying for permanent residency, and they need help with their paperwork." She started gathering the documents, organizing them into folders with practiced efficiency. "This is legitimate, Trevor. I'm providing a service people need." I watched her move around the room, this stranger wearing my wife's face. "How long has this been going on?" "About 18 months. She said it casually, as if she were discussing when she'd started a new exercise routine. "I started small, just helping a few families that one of my coworkers knew. Word of mouth spread. Now I have clients all over the city." 18 months, a year and a half of secret meetings, hidden income, a parallel life I knew nothing about. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this." She zipped a leather portfolio closed. "Suspicious, judgmental, assuming the worst. I wanted to build something before bringing you into it. Prove it was viable. By lying to me for a year and a half? By protecting something that's mine." She picked up the portfolio and her phone from the nightstand. I realized now she'd left the one downstairs as a decoy, had a second device she actually used. "I need to go. We can talk about this tonight, after the girls are in bed." She moved toward the door, but I blocked her path. "I'm coming with you." Absolutely not. If this is legitimate, you won't mind me seeing how you conduct these consultations. I kept my voice level, but firm. If you're really just helping people with paperwork, there's no reason I can't observe. Jessica's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might refuse outright. Then something shifted in her expression. A calculation. A decision made. Fine. But you stay quiet and let me work. These people are nervous enough without a stranger making them uncomfortable. I'll be invisible, I promised. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Get your jacket. We leave in 10 minutes. As I followed her down the stairs, watching her move through our home with the confidence of someone who'd been leading a double life for 18 months, I realized that whatever I was about to witness, it would shatter what remained of the illusion I'd been living in. The affair I'd braced myself for might have been simpler, cleaner. But this secret business, these mysterious consultations, the careful way she'd phrased David's resources, suggested something far more complex and far more dangerous. I thought about the immigration forms on the desk, the families paying for help they desperately needed. I thought about Jessica's defensive posture, her careful words about making the process smoother. And I wondered what exactly I was about to discover in that home in East Charlotte. I spent the next 2 days in a state of controlled observation. I went to work, managed my projects, returned home for dinner with the family. Everything appeared normal on the surface. Jessica kissed me goodbye in the mornings, asked about my day over spaghetti and meatloaf, helped Lily with her math homework. But I watched her now with different eyes. The second phone made occasional appearances. She'd check it during commercial breaks, in the bathroom, while folding laundry. Always casual, always brief. I noticed how her expression would shift, a tightening around her eyes, a quick glance to see if anyone was watching. Then the phone would disappear back into her purse or pocket, and she'd return to whatever mundane domestic task had been interrupted. I didn't confront her again, didn't demand answers or explanations. I simply waited for Thursday evening, when she'd promised I could attend one of her consultations. On Wednesday night, as we were getting ready for bed, Jessica mentioned it almost as an afterthought. "The meeting tomorrow is at 7, she said, removing her earrings at the dresser. "In East Charlotte, near the Plaza Midwood area. A family from Honduras, parents and 3 kids. They've been here 6 years on expired tourist visas." "What exactly are you helping them with?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Adjustment of status application. They have a potential pathway through their oldest daughter. She was born here, turned 21 last year. She can petition for them." Jessica turned to face me. "It's complicated, Trevor. There are forms, affidavits, financial documentation requirements. These people don't understand the system. They can barely read English." "And David? What's his role?" Her jaw tightened slightly. "He provides expertise on documentation issues, makes sure everything is properly prepared. For a fee." "Yes, for a fee. That's how consulting businesses work." She pulled her hair into a ponytail. "Look, if you're going to come tomorrow, I need you to understand something. These families are desperate. They're terrified of deportation, of being separated from their children. They need help, and they're willing to pay for it." "How much are you charging them?" Jessica hesitated. $5,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $5,000 from a family living on expired visas, likely working under the table for minimum wage or less. I thought of our own comfortable life, the paid-off cars, the college funds, the annual beach vacation. $5,000 would be devastating to a family like that. That seems excessive, I said carefully. It's the going rate. Immigration attorneys charge even more. 8, 10,000 for a case like this. She climbed into bed. Besides, David's resources don't come cheap. He has contacts at various agencies, people who can expedite processing, make sure applications don't get lost in the system. I didn't respond. I turned off the lamp and lay in the darkness, listening to Jessica's breathing slow into sleep. Contacts at various agencies, expedited processing. Each phrase felt like another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to complete. The next day crawled by. I left work at 6, drove home to find Jessica already dressed. Professional but not too formal. Navy slacks and a cream blouse. The kind of outfit that suggested competence and trustworthiness. "Ready?" she asked. "Where exactly are we going?" She gave me an address on Eastway Drive, a neighborhood I knew vaguely as working class, heavily immigrant. Strip malls with signs in Spanish, small churches, apartment complexes with cars packed into every available space. We took her car. I drove while she checked her second phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. I caught glimpses of messages in Spanish, names I didn't recognize, dollar amounts. "Is David meeting us there?" I asked. "He'll arrive separately. He doesn't like to be too visible at these meetings." She glanced at me. "Trevor, I need you to let me handle this. Don't interrupt, don't ask questions. Just observe. These people are already nervous. Having a stranger there will make them uncomfortable. I'm your husband. That makes me part of this business, doesn't it?" "Not yet, it doesn't." Her voice carried an edge. "I've built this on my own. I've established trust with these communities. You showing up changes the dynamic." We pulled into the parking lot of a small office complex, the kind with a tax preparation service, a nail salon, a check cashing place. Jessica directed me to a unit at the end, its windows covered with paper. A hand-lettered sign read, "Consultoría de Inmigración," Immigration Consulting. "You have an office?" I asked. "Month-to-month lease, cash." She gathered her bag. "Come on." Inside, the space was sparse. A folding table, several plastic chairs, a filing cabinet. No computer, no landline, nothing that suggested permanence or official business. A family of 5 sat waiting, the parents in their 40s, children ranging from perhaps 8 to early 20s. They stood when we entered, expressions wary. Jessica immediately switched to Spanish, her tone warm and reassuring. I understood enough to catch the basics: introductions, apologies for bringing her husband, assurances that everything was proceeding well. The family relaxed slightly, though the father kept his arms crossed, protective. Jessica gestured for them to sit, then began spreading documents across the table. I recognized some of the forms. I-485 Adjustment of Status Applications, I-864 Affidavits of Support, birth certificates, employment records. Everything looked official, printed on proper government forms. But then David arrived. He entered through a back door I hadn't noticed, carrying a leather briefcase. He nodded at Jessica, barely acknowledged me, and took a seat at the table. When he opened the briefcase, I saw stacks of documents, already filled out, already bearing official-looking stamps and seals. "Everything's ready," he said to Jessica in English, then switched to Spanish for the family. "Your applications have been pre-processed through our contacts. All you need to do is sign where indicated, and we'll submit them directly to the appropriate offices." The father leaned forward, studying the documents. "These have already been approved?" "Pre-approved," David corrected smoothly. Our contacts have reviewed your case and determined you meet all requirements. This just expedites the official process. Instead of waiting 18 months for an interview, you'll have your green cards in 3 to 4 months. Something cold settled in my stomach. Immigration applications didn't work like that. There was no pre-approval process, no way to skip interviews or background checks. I watched as David produced what appeared to be official USCIS receipts, complete with case numbers and stamps. They were fake. They had to be. Jessica was collecting payment. $100 bills counted carefully and placed in an envelope. The family looked relieved, hopeful. The mother was crying, holding her youngest daughter. "What happens next?" the father asked. "You wait," Jessica said. "Keep copies of everything we've given you. In 3 months, you'll receive notification of your interview date. Attend that interview, answer honestly, and your green cards will be issued. And if there are problems? There won't be." David's voice carried absolute confidence. "We've handled hundreds of cases exactly like yours. The documentation is perfect." The meeting lasted another 20 minutes, Jessica explaining what to expect, warning them not to discuss the process with anyone, providing a phone number to call with questions. The family left looking transformed, carrying their fake documents like precious treasures. When the door closed behind them, I turned to Jessica. "Those documents are forgeries." She didn't deny it. Neither did David. "They're good enough to pass inspection," David said, packing his briefcase. "The stamps are authentic. We have sources at several USCIS field offices. The case numbers are real, just reassigned. By the time anyone notices discrepancies, these families will have been here long enough to claim other protections." "That's fraud." I looked at Jessica. "You're selling fake green cards to desperate families." "I'm giving them hope," she said quietly. "Do you know what it's like to live in constant fear of deportation? To work jobs that pay $3 an hour because you have no legal recourse? These families deserve better. So you're taking their money they can't afford, for worthless documents that will get them deported when they're discovered? They won't be discovered." David closed his briefcase. "We've been operating for 2 years across 4 states. Hundreds of families. Not one has been caught. 2 years. Not 18 months like Jessica had claimed." Another lie. "How many?" I asked. "How many families have you done this to?" Jessica and David exchanged glances. 437 cases, David said. Approximately 2,000 individuals. Gross revenue of $2.1 million. The numbers were staggering. I thought of that family walking out with their fake documents, believing they were finally safe. I thought of hundreds more, all living with the same false hope, all facing eventual discovery and deportation. "I'm leaving," I said. Jessica grabbed my arm. "Trevor, wait. Don't touch me." I pulled away. "I need to think." I walked out into the parking lot, into the cool October evening. Behind me, I heard Jessica and David arguing in low voices, but I didn't stop. I got into my car. I'd driven separately without realizing it would matter, and sat in the darkness. My phone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided what to do. The ICE tip line answered on the 3rd ring. I sat in my car outside the apartment complex for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. The phone felt heavy in my hand, the ICE tip line still displayed on the screen. I hadn't pressed the call button yet. Around me, Charlotte's evening traffic hummed along Independence Boulevard. Headlights swept past. A woman walked by with a stroller. Someone's car alarm chirped. The world continuing its ordinary Tuesday evening while I sat there, holding evidence of a federal crime that my wife had committed against hundreds of desperate families. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage so pure it felt almost clean. I thought about the Mendoza family. The way Rosa had looked at those documents like they were salvation itself. The way her husband had counted out those bills with such careful reverence. They'd probably been saving for months, maybe years. $5,000 to people living in the shadows wasn't just money, it was everything. Rent for half a year. A car that actually ran. Their daughter's quinceañera. Medical care when someone got sick. And Jessica had taken it. Smiled warmly, spoke her careful Spanish phrases, accepted their gratitude, and handed them worthless paper that would do nothing except maybe get them arrested when they tried to use it. 437 families, 2,000 people, over $2 million. I finally pressed the call button. The line rang 3 times before a recorded message began. You have reached the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement tip line. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911. Otherwise, please stay on the line and your call will be answered by the next available agent. Generic hold music played. Something instrumental and vaguely patriotic. I waited. ICE tip line. This is Agent Brennan. How can I help you? The voice was male, professional, slightly bored. Like he'd answered this phone 1,000 times and heard everything from legitimate concerns to paranoid conspiracy theories. I need to report an immigration fraud operation, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. A pause. Then, okay, sir, can you tell me your name? Trevor Holloway. I'm calling about my wife. I heard the click of a keyboard. And what's your wife's name? Jessica Holloway. She's been running an immigration consulting business with a partner named David Lawrence. They're selling fake green cards to immigrant families, charging $5,000 per family and providing forged documents. The boredom left Agent Brennan's voice. How do you know this, Mr. Holloway? I just witnessed a consultation. I watched them hand a Honduran family fake applications with forged stamps and seals. They promised green cards in 3 to 4 months instead of the normal processing time. The family paid in cash. Where did this take place? An apartment on Independence Boulevard in Charlotte. I can give you the exact address. More typing. And you're certain the documents are fraudulent? The partner, David Lawrence, told me directly. He said they've processed 437 cases across 4 states, approximately 2,000 individuals. He was bragging about it. Jesus, Brennan muttered, then caught himself. I'm sorry, sir. That's a significant operation. I'm going to need to transfer you to our Document and Benefit Fraud Task Force. Can you hold? Yes? More hold music. I watched a young couple walk past my car, holding hands, laughing about something. They looked about Emma's age. In a few years, that would be my daughter, walking around, falling in love, building a life. Except now her mother would be a convicted felon. The thought made my stomach turn. This is Special Agent Catherine Walsh, Document and Benefit Fraud. I understand you have information about a large-scale immigration fraud operation? This voice was female, sharp, all business. No boredom at all. I went through it again. Jessica's business. David Lawrence. The consultation I'd witnessed. The numbers David had revealed. Agent Walsh asked detailed questions. How long had I known about the business? What exactly had I seen? Could I identify the family who'd received documents tonight? Did I know where David Lawrence lived or worked? I answered everything I could. Admitted I'd only learned about the business today. Described the Mendoza family in detail. Explained that I had no information about David beyond what I'd witnessed. "Mr. Holloway," Agent Walsh said, her tone shifting slightly. "I need to ask you something directly. Are you reporting this because you want to stop a fraud operation or because you're angry at your wife?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected bureaucracy, procedures, maybe skepticism, not psychological evaluation. "Both," I said honestly. "I'm furious at her. But that doesn't make what she's doing any less criminal. Those families are going to use those fake documents thinking they're safe. They're going to come out of hiding, apply for jobs, maybe try to travel, and when someone actually checks those documents, they're going to be arrested and deported. They've lost their money and they're in more danger than before." "That's correct," Walsh said. "If what you're telling me is accurate, your wife and her partner have created a significant public safety issue. These families will be exposed to law enforcement contact they otherwise would have avoided." "So what happens now?" "I'm going to open an investigation file. I'll need you to come to our Charlotte field office tomorrow to give a formal statement. Can you do that?" "Yes." "I'm also going to need any documentation you can provide. Text messages, emails, financial records, client lists, anything that demonstrates the scope of the operation." I thought about Jessica's phone, her laptop, the filing cabinet in our home office that I'd never paid much attention to because I'd trusted her to handle her own business affairs. "I can get you documentation," I said. "How much trouble am I in for not reporting this sooner? I only found out today, but technically I've known for several hours." "You're not in trouble, Mr. Holloway. You're reporting a crime you just discovered. That's exactly what you should be doing." She paused. "I do need to tell you that once we begin this investigation, it's going to affect your family significantly. Your wife will likely face federal charges. If convicted, she's looking at substantial prison time. Your family's finances will be scrutinized, and the immigrant families involved will be contacted as part of the investigation, which may result in deportation proceedings." "I understand." "Do you? Because once you come in tomorrow and give that formal statement, there's no taking it back. This becomes a federal case." I looked at the apartment building where Jessica was probably still inside with David, counting their money, planning their next consultation, maybe laughing about how easy it was to take advantage of desperate people. "I understand," I repeated. "What time tomorrow?" 9 a.m., Federal Building on West Trade Street. Ask for me at the security desk." She gave me her direct number and email address. Made me repeat them back to confirm I had them right. Then she said something that surprised me. "Mr. Holloway, I've been doing this work for 8 years. I've seen a lot of fraud operations. But I've never had a spouse turn in their partner like this. Most people try to protect their families, even when they know what's happening is wrong." "My family is my daughter's," I said. "Not the woman who's been lying to me for 2 years while stealing from people who have nothing." "Fair enough. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. The line went dead. I sat there in the parking lot with my phone in my hand, watching the apartment building. After about 10 minutes, I saw Jessica emerge. She was alone, carrying her leather portfolio, walking to her car with the confident stride of someone who'd just had a successful business meeting. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like my wife, the woman who'd held Lily when she was born, who'd taught Emma to ride a bike, who'd kissed me goodbye this morning before heading to work at the pharmaceutical company where she supposedly spent her days. I watched her drive away, then started my own car and headed home. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Jessica's purse still on the counter. The girls' backpacks by the door from when I'd picked them up from school. I'd told them I had to run an errand and left them with our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. I'd need to pick them up soon. But first, I went to Jessica's home office. I sat at Jessica's desk. Our desk, technically, in the home office we'd set up 3 years ago when she said she wanted to do some freelance marketing consulting. The MacBook Pro I'd bought her for her birthday hummed softly, password protected. I'd never needed her password before. Never wanted it. That kind of trust seemed quaint now, like something from a previous lifetime. The office looked legitimate. A filing cabinet stood against one wall, professional and orderly. A corkboard displayed business cards, immigration law reference sheets, and a calendar marked with appointments. On the desk sat a leather portfolio, the kind you'd see at any professional consultation. Jessica had created an entire world here, complete and convincing. I pulled open the top desk drawer. Pens, highlighters, sticky notes, normal office supplies. The second drawer held file folders, each labeled with what appeared to be case numbers. I pulled one at random. C2019-0847. Inside were photocopied documents, intake forms with handwritten information, payment receipts. The intake form showed a family from Honduras. Names, dates of birth, current address in Raleigh. Employment information. The father worked in landscaping, the mother cleaned houses. 2 children, ages 6 and 8. At the bottom of the form, in Jessica's handwriting, initial consultation $315, $500 deposit received. Balance $4,500 due upon document delivery. I set it aside and pulled another folder. A couple from Guatemala, living in Greensboro. Same format, same fee structure. Another folder. A single mother from El Salvador with 3 children, working 2 jobs, living in Durham. The filing cabinet held more. I opened the top drawer and found it organized by state: North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee. Each state section contained dozens of folders. I didn't count them all, but David's number of 437 cases seemed accurate, possibly conservative. In the back of the North Carolina section, I found a different kind of folder, this one labeled simply DL. I pulled it out and opened it on the desk. Inside were documents I didn't expect. A copy of David Lawrence's driver's license, except the name on it wasn't David Lawrence. It was Daniel Ortega, with an address in Miami, Florida. There was a second ID, this one showing the same photograph but with the name David Lawson and a Virginia address. A third ID showed Derek Lang, North Carolina. Beneath the IDs, I found what looked like employee records from USCIS. Not David's employment records. He wasn't a USCIS employee. These were records belonging to someone named Patricia Vance, a document examiner at the National Benefits Center in Lee's Summit, Missouri. Her employee ID number, her digital signature, her access credentials, all printed out and stored in this folder. There was a photograph, too. Patricia Vance at what looked like a bar or restaurant, sitting close to a man I recognized as David, or Daniel, or Derek, or whoever he really was. The photo appeared candid, taken without their knowledge. I sat back in the chair trying to piece it together. David wasn't just a forger working from his garage. He had access to real USCIS systems through Patricia Vance. Whether she was a willing participant or a victim of his manipulation, I couldn't tell from these documents. But it explained how the forgeries could be so convincing. They weren't entirely forgeries. They were real documents, created in real systems, just issued under fraudulent pretenses. My phone buzzed. A text from my site supervisor. "Everything okay? You left in a hurry." I typed back, "Family emergency. I'll call tomorrow." The phone showed 4:47 p.m. I had just over 16 hours until my meeting with Agent Walsh. I needed to gather everything I could, create a complete picture of the operation before I handed it over to federal investigators. I turned to the filing cabinet's bottom drawer. This one was locked. The key wasn't in the desk drawers. I checked the pencil holder, under the desk pad, in the small decorative bowl where Jessica kept paper clips. Nothing. I stood and surveyed the office, thinking like Jessica. Where would she hide something important? The bookshelf held marketing textbooks from her college days, some bestsellers, framed photos of the girls. I pulled books at random, checking behind them. Nothing. Then I remembered Jessica wore a necklace, a silver locket I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. She never took it off, said it was her good luck charm. But there had been a matching key pendant that came with the locket set, a decorative piece I'd thought was just aesthetic. I'd seen it in her jewelry box. Our bedroom was down the hall. I walked there quickly, aware that time was passing, that Jessica would be picking up the girls from school soon and heading home. I needed to be gone before then, needed to avoid the confrontation until I had everything in place. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser. I opened it and found the key pendant immediately. It was larger than the others, more ornate. I took it back to the office and tried it in the filing cabinet lock. It fit. The drawer held 3 thick accordion folders, each labeled with a year: 2022, 2023, 2024. I pulled out the 2022 folder first and spread its contents on the desk. Financial records. Bank statements for an account I'd never seen, held at a credit union in South Carolina under the name New Horizons Immigration Services, LLC. Jessica's name appeared as the registered agent. The first deposit, dated March 2022, was for $15,000. After that, deposits came regularly, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, sometimes multiple deposits in a single week. By December 2022, the account balance had reached $287,000. The 2023 folder showed the operation expanding. More deposits, larger amounts, and now there were expense records too. Payments to something called Apex Document Solutions, David's operation presumably. Payments to a lawyer in Virginia for LLC formation and business licensing. Payments to a website developer. Payments to someone named Rita Fuentes for client acquisition and referrals. The 2024 folder was thickest. I found wire transfer records showing money being moved from the New Horizons account to personal accounts. Jessica's personal checking account, which I had access to and monitored regularly, received periodic transfers of $2,000 to $3,000, amounts small enough not to raise red flags. But there was another personal account, one I'd never known about, receiving much larger transfers. In January alone, $45,000 had been moved there. There were also expense records for rent on office spaces in 3 different cities: Raleigh, Richmond, and Greenville, South Carolina. Jessica was running physical consultation offices, not just working from home. I photographed everything with my phone, page after page, making sure the images were clear and readable. My hands shook slightly as I worked, a combination of adrenaline and something else, grief, maybe, or rage, or just the sheer unreality of discovering that my wife of 15 years had built an entire criminal enterprise while I'd been coaching soccer and planning family vacations. The last item in the 2024 folder was a handwritten ledger, the kind of thing someone keeps when they don't trust digital records alone. It listed every case by number, with columns for client name, deposit date, balance due, document delivery date, and final payment date. I flipped through the pages. There were hundreds of entries going back to March 2022. At the back of the ledger, Jessica had written notes, calculations, projections, goals. One note, dated January 2024, read, Goal, 1,000 cases by end of year, expand to GA and FL. Need 2 more DLs. 2 more DLs. 2 more people like David Lawrence, with access to government systems and the skills to create convincing forgeries. My phone showed 5:23 p.m. The girls would be home soon. I needed to leave. I photographed the ledger, every page, then carefully returned everything to the accordion folders and placed them back in the locked drawer. I returned the key pendant to Jessica's jewelry box, made sure the office looked undisturbed, and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. As I headed downstairs, I heard the garage door opening. They were home. I heard her car in the driveway at 6:47 p.m. The garage door opener hummed, and I felt my heart rate spike despite my best efforts to remain calm. I'd spent the last hour and a half organizing everything I'd photographed into a coherent timeline, cross-referencing addresses with dates, matching bank deposits to client files. The scope of what Jessica had built was staggering. Not just the fraud itself, but the infrastructure supporting it. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years had constructed an entire shadow life while making dinner conversation about her pharmaceutical marketing campaigns. I'd put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Every file returned to its precise location in the drawer, the laptop closed at the same angle, the desk chair positioned just so. Jessica was meticulous about her space, a trait I'd always admired, never questioning why someone in marketing needed such rigorous organizational systems for what should have been straightforward campaign materials. The door from the garage to the kitchen opened. I heard her keys hit the bowl on the entry table, the familiar sound that had marked her arrival home for thousands of evenings. My phone sat on the coffee table in front of me, screen dark, containing enough evidence to destroy our family and potentially save hundreds of others from financial ruin and deportation. Trevor? Her voice carried from the kitchen, light and casual. Your truck's here. You feeling okay? I'd rehearsed this moment during my drive to Agent Walsh's office, during the silent hour in our house gathering evidence, during every minute since I'd made the decision to report her. I'd imagined confronting her with everything I knew, watching her face as I detailed the bank accounts, the multiple offices, the 437 families. I'd imagined her denials, her justifications, her potential confession. But sitting there listening to her footsteps approach, I realized confrontation would accomplish nothing except alerting her to what I knew. She'd have time to destroy evidence, to warn David or Daniel or whatever his real name was, to move money or disappear. Agent Walsh had been clear. Federal investigations took time to build properly. Tipping Jessica off now could compromise everything. In here, I called back, keeping my voice neutral. Yeah, just a headache. Came home early. She appeared in the living room doorway, still in her work clothes, a navy blazer over a cream blouse, professional and polished. Her expression showed concern as she crossed to where I sat on the couch. You never come home early for headaches. Should I be worried? The irony of her concern for my health, given what I now knew about her activities, nearly broke my composure. But I'd spent 15 years reading her moods and expressions. She'd spent those same years perfecting the art of deception. Just a migraine coming on, I said. Took something for it. Figured I'd be useless at the site anyway. Jessica sat beside me, her hand finding my shoulder in that familiar gesture of comfort. The touch I'd once found reassuring now felt performative, calculated. How many times had she touched me this way while her mind was occupied with client meetings, document forgeries, bank deposits? "Did you pick up the girls?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Their backpacks weren't by the door, and the house was too quiet. "They're at Emma's photography club until 7:30, Jessica said. "I figured I'd grab them on the way back from my last meeting, but I can get them now if you need me here." Her last meeting. Another consultation, perhaps. Another desperate family handing over thousands of dollars for worthless documents. Another entry in the spreadsheet I'd photographed. Another deposit into accounts I wasn't supposed to know existed. "No, I'm fine," I said. "Just need to rest. How was your day?" The question was automatic, part of our routine. But tonight I listened differently as she launched into a story about a difficult client at the pharmaceutical company. A marketing campaign that wasn't performing as expected. Office politics involving people whose names I recognized from years of her stories. Was any of it real? Did she actually spend her days at that office, or was the pharmaceutical job itself part of the elaborate fiction? My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Walsh. "Received your email. Files are comprehensive. See you at 9 a.m. Don't engage with subject before then." I let the screen go dark without responding, aware of Jessica's eyes on me. "Work?" she asked. "Yeah, tomorrow's schedule." The lie came easier than it should have. Maybe deception was contagious, spreading through a marriage like rot through wood. Jessica stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'm going to change before I get the girls. You want anything? Water? Something to eat?" "I'm good, thanks." I watched her climb the stairs to our bedroom, the same path I'd taken hours earlier to photograph her secrets. She'd go to her closet, hang up her blazer, change into something casual. Maybe she'd glance at her laptop, check that everything was undisturbed. She'd never suspect that her husband, reliable, trusting Trevor, had spent the afternoon documenting evidence for a federal investigation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Emma. "Dad, can you pick us up? Mom's running late." I glanced at the time. 7:22 p.m. Jessica had said she'd get them at 7:30, but apparently she'd told Emma something different. Another small deception in a marriage built on them. "On my way," I texted back. "Jessica?" I called up the stairs. "Emma says you're running late. I'll grab the girls." She appeared at the top of the stairs, now in jeans and a sweater. "Oh, I told her I might be a few minutes behind." "You don't have to. I need some air anyway. Headache's better." "You sure?" "Yeah. Be back in 20. I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage, grateful for the excuse to leave, to not have to maintain the pretense of normalcy for a few more minutes. The evening air was cool as I backed out of the driveway, past Jessica's car with its immaculate interior that probably contained burner phones and client files I'd never noticed. The drive to Emma's school took 12 minutes. I spent them thinking about Agent Walsh's office, about the federal agents who would soon be building a case against my wife, about the Honduran family I'd watched hand over $5,000 for documents that would never protect them. I thought about Patricia Vance, whoever she was, with her access to real USCIS systems. I thought about David or Daniel with his multiple identities and his casual discussion of expanding into new markets. But mostly I thought about the moment I'd have to tell Emma and Lily that their mother was going to prison. Emma was waiting outside the school entrance with Lily, both of them bundled in jackets against the October chill. They climbed into the truck with the easy comfort of routine, Emma immediately launching into a story about a photograph she'd taken, Lily interrupting with details about her own day. "Where's Mom?" Lily asked as I pulled out of the parking lot. "Home. I picked you guys up instead." "Is she sick?" Emma's question carried concern. At 12, she was old enough to notice disruptions in routine, to sense when things weren't quite right. "No, she's fine. I just came home early, so I figured I'd get you." In the rearview mirror, I watched Emma exchange a glance with her sister, that silent communication children develop when they sense adult tension. They'd grown up in a house where both parents were present and engaged, where routines were consistent, where the biggest disruptions were work trips or school events. They had no framework for what was coming. We pulled into the garage at 7:44 p.m. Jessica was in the kitchen, pulling together a quick dinner, pasta with marinara, garlic bread, a salad. The domestic scene was so perfectly normal it felt surreal. "How was photography club?" Jessica asked Emma, and I listened to my daughter describe her afternoon while my wife moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, playing her role flawlessly. The house felt different when I returned. The same walls, the same furniture, the same family photos lining the hallway, but everything had shifted into a grotesque parody of itself. I'd been gone 3 hours, sitting in my truck in a grocery store parking lot, organizing documents, photographing pages, uploading files to a secure cloud storage account Agent Walsh had provided access credentials for. Now it was past 7, and the kitchen lights were on. I could hear Jessica moving around inside, the familiar sounds of dinner preparation. On any other night, I would have walked in with a kiss on her cheek, asked about her day, helped set the table. The muscle memory of 15 years of marriage pulled at me even as my stomach turned. I sat in the driveway for another 5 minutes, watching her shadow move across the kitchen window. She was making pasta. I could see her reaching for the colander in the upper cabinet. Wednesday was usually pasta night. The routine continued, oblivious and obscene. My phone buzzed. Emma. "Dad, where are you? Mom says dinner in 10. I typed back, "Pulling in now, sweetheart." The performance had to continue for one more night. Agent Walsh had been explicit about that. "Don't do anything to alert her," she'd said. "No confrontation, no accusations, nothing out of the ordinary. We need her to believe everything is normal until we execute the warrants. If she runs, if she destroys evidence, if she warns her partner, we lose leverage." So I would eat pasta. I would ask about Emma's photography project and Lily's spelling test. I would sleep in the same bed as a federal criminal who'd been lying to my face for 2 years, who'd looked into the eyes of desperate families and sold them false hope for $5,000 a transaction. The front door opened before I reached it. Jessica stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm interior lights, wearing jeans and the blue sweater I'd bought her last Christmas. She smiled. "There you are. Long day?" "Meeting ran late," I said, the lie coming easier than I expected. "Sorry I didn't text." "No problem. Girls are starving, though." She stepped aside to let me in, her hand brushing my shoulder as I passed. The same affectionate gesture she'd made 10,000 times before. My skin crawled. Dinner was exactly as excruciating as I'd anticipated. Lily chattered about her upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. Emma showed me photos she'd taken of autumn leaves, genuinely beautiful compositions that made my chest ache. Jessica asked about my day, and I manufactured details about the Riverside project, the same project I'd actually left early from to discover her criminal enterprise. "How was your day?" I asked, because that's what I always asked. and Agent Walsh's warning echoed in my head. Nothing out of the ordinary. Pretty standard. Conference calls, budget reviews. Jessica twirled pasta on her fork. Though I did have a consultation this afternoon that went really well. This family, they've been waiting so long for their paperwork to process, and I think we finally have a pathway forward for them. The Mendoza family. She was talking about the Mendoza family, whose $5,000 was now sitting in one of her hidden accounts, whose fake green cards would be discovered the moment any authority examined them, whose children would be ripped from their schools and their lives because of the woman sitting across from me, smiling, lying without a single tell. "That's great," I said. "You do good work." The words tasted like poison. After dinner, I helped with dishes while Jessica supervised homework. Another routine, another performance. She stood at the kitchen counter, reviewing Lily's math worksheet, making encouraging sounds. The same counter where she'd left her purse that Tuesday afternoon. The same purse that had led me to David Lawrence and the entire rotting truth. "You okay?" Jessica asked, glancing up from Lily's division problems. "You seem quiet." "Just tired," I said, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary. "Thinking about the timeline for Riverside." She accepted this without question, returned her attention to Lily's homework. Why wouldn't she? I'd never given her reason to doubt me, never questioned her stories, never challenged the convenient explanations. I'd been the perfect Mark, trusting, distracted by work and children, content in my comfortable ignorance. That Trevor was gone. The man washing dishes in this kitchen had spent the afternoon providing federal agents with evidence that would destroy multiple lives, including his own daughter's understanding of their mother. That man knew exactly how many families had been defrauded, 437, exactly how much money was hidden in offshore accounts, $287,000 in the Caymans alone, exactly how many states this operation spanned, 4, possibly 5, if the Atlanta expansion had already started. That man was a stranger to Jessica, despite 15 years of marriage. The symmetry was almost poetic. We put the girls to bed together, another routine. I read Lily 2 chapters of her current book while Jessica helped Emma organize her school binder. Then we switched, and I spent 20 minutes talking to Emma about composition and lighting and photography while Jessica tucked Lily in. Tag team parenting, the comfortable choreography of a functional family. Except one parent was a federal criminal, and the other had spent the day ensuring her arrest. "Want to watch something?" Jessica asked when we finally retreated to the living room. She was already scrolling through streaming options, curled into her usual corner of the couch. "Actually, I'm exhausted," I said. "Think I'll just head up." She looked disappointed but not suspicious. "Okay, I'll be up in a bit." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, the same bedroom where I'd found her with David Lawrence exactly 24 hours earlier. The same bed we'd shared for 15 years. I changed into sleep clothes mechanically, brushed my teeth, set my alarm for 7:30 a.m. My appointment with Agent Walsh was at 9, and I'd need time to prepare myself. Jessica came up an hour later. I pretended to be asleep, controlling my breathing, keeping my body relaxed. She moved quietly through her nighttime routine, trying not to wake me. Considerate, as always. She slipped into bed, and I felt her settle on her side, facing away. In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the Mendoza family. 3 children. The youngest, maybe 6 years old. The father had worked construction. I'd seen it in the intake form. Probably not unlike the crews I managed. Men who showed up before dawn and worked until their bodies gave out, sending money home, building lives in the margins. They'd saved $5,000. I couldn't imagine how long that had taken, how many sacrifices. And they'd given it to my wife, who'd smiled and promised them security, knowing she was selling them nothing but paper and risk. Tomorrow, Agent Walsh would begin the process of dismantling the entire operation. Federal warrants would be issued. David Lawrence, or whatever his real name was, would be located and arrested. Jessica would be taken into custody. The 437 families would discover their documents were worthless, and I would be the one who made it happen. I'd told Agent Walsh I wanted to be there when they arrested Jessica. She'd cautioned against it, said it might be traumatic, said I should consider the impact on the girls. But I'd been firm. I needed to see her face when she realized. I needed to watch the performance end. 9 a.m., Agent Walsh had confirmed. Federal Building, 4th floor. Bring any additional documentation you found. We'll take your formal statement, and then we move. Beside me, Jessica's breathing deepened into sleep. Peaceful, untroubled. She had no idea that this was the last night she'd spend in this bed, in this house, in this life. I didn't sleep at all. I slept beside her that night. I'm not sure why that detail matters, but it does. Maybe because it was the last time I would ever lie next to someone I thought I knew. Or maybe because it demonstrates just how completely I'd separated myself from the man who'd coached soccer games and believed in the fundamental goodness of his marriage. The Trevor Holloway, who existed before discovering New Horizons immigration services, would have confronted her immediately, demanded answers, probably thrown something. This version, the one who'd spent hours photographing evidence and scheduling federal appointments, simply set his alarm for 5:30 a.m. and closed his eyes. I didn't sleep, of course. Jessica did, her breathing deep and regular, one arm draped across my chest in a gesture that had once meant comfort. Now it felt like a prop in a play that had run too long. I counted the hours until my meeting with Agent Walsh. 4 hours and 37 minutes. 4 hours and 22 minutes. The mathematics of betrayal, measured in increments of darkness. At 5:30, I rose without waking her. The routine of it, shower, coffee, the same blue shirt I'd worn 100 Wednesdays, felt like method acting. I was playing the role of husband, father, ordinary man heading to an ordinary job. In 3.5 hours, I would sit across from a federal agent and systematically dismantle my wife's criminal enterprise. The girls were still asleep when I left. I stood in each of their doorways for longer than usual, watching them in that particular stillness of childhood sleep. Emma had fallen asleep with her phone on her pillow, probably scrolling through photography tutorials. Lily's stuffed elephant had fallen to the floor. I picked it up and tucked it back beside her. These small acts of fatherhood felt both essential and meaningless. By tonight, everything would be different. By tonight, they would know their mother wasn't who they thought she was. Neither was their father, for that matter. The drive to the federal building took 23 minutes in morning traffic. I'd looked up the address the night before, street viewed it like I was planning a construction site visit. The building was downtown, all concrete and tinted glass, the kind of architecture designed to project authority. I parked in a garage 2 blocks away, fed the meter enough quarters for 3 hours, though I had no idea how long this would take, and walked. Agent Walsh had said to ask for her at the security desk. The lobby was already busy at 8:47 a.m., people moving with the purposeful efficiency of federal employment. I gave my name to a uniformed guard who looked barely old enough to vote. He made a phone call, handed me a visitor badge, and directed me to the elevators. 7th floor, someone will meet you. That someone was Agent Walsh herself, waiting when the elevator doors opened. She looked different in daylight, or maybe just more real. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a gray suit that suggested she'd been at this job long enough to know that comfort mattered more than fashion. Her handshake was firm, professional. "Mr. Holloway, thank you for coming in. Follow me." She led me through a maze of corridors, beige walls, fluorescent lighting, the particular smell of government buildings that's somehow universal, to a small conference room. No windows, a table, 4 chairs, a recording device already set up in the center. A woman I didn't recognize was already seated, laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard. "This is Agent Stephanie Brooks," Walsh said. "She'll be taking notes while we record your statement. Can I get you coffee? Water?" I shook my head. My mouth was dry, but I didn't trust myself to hold a cup steady. Walsh sat across from me, Brooks to her left. The recording device sat between us like a small black witness. Walsh pressed a button. A red light activated. "This is Special Agent Catherine Walsh, Document and Benefit Fraud Task Force, conducting an interview on Wednesday, October 18th at 9:03 a.m. Present are Agent Stephanie Brooks and witness Trevor Holloway." "Mr. Holloway, you understand that this interview is being recorded?" "Yes." "And you're here voluntarily to provide information regarding potential immigration fraud?" "Yes." "Good. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me when you first became aware of your wife's activities." So I told her. Everything. The canceled meeting, coming home early, the closed door and unfamiliar voices. The consultation I'd witnessed with the Mendoza family. Walsh's pen moved faster when I mentioned their name, and I realized they might become more than just faces in my memory. They might become case numbers, evidence, victims with names in federal documents. I described the office I'd found, the meticulous records Jessica had kept, the bank statements and client files, and that photograph of David Lawrence and Patricia Vance. Walsh interrupted occasionally with questions. How long had I known about New Horizons? Since yesterday afternoon. Had I confronted Jessica? No. Did she know I was here? No. Had I told anyone else? No. Each answer felt like another brick in a wall I was building between my old life and whatever came next. "You mentioned you took photographs of documents," Walsh said. "Do you have those with you?" I pulled out my phone, opened the Photos app, and slid it across the table. Walsh scrolled through them, her expression unchanging, while Brooks leaned over to see. They spent 15 minutes going through every image, the ledgers, the bank statements, the driver's licenses, that photograph. Walsh paused on the image of the Cayman account statement. "This shows a balance of $287,000, she said. It wasn't a question. "As of last month, yes." "And you had no knowledge of this account before yesterday?" "None." She made a note on her pad. "We'll need the originals of these documents. Are they still in your home?" "In my car. I brought them." Something shifted in Walsh's expression. Not quite approval, but a recognition that I'd understood what this required. "Agent Brooks will retrieve them." "Mr. Holloway, I need to ask you something directly. What do you want to happen here?" The question caught me off guard. I'd spent the last 18 hours gathering evidence, documenting crimes, preparing to hand over my wife to federal prosecution. But no one had asked me what I actually wanted. I stopped. What did I want? For Jessica to face consequences? For the families she'd defrauded to get justice? For my daughters to somehow emerge from this unscathed? All of it seemed impossible. "I want the truth," I want those families to know what happened to them. I want... I paused again, searching for honesty. I want her to face what she's done. Walsh nodded slowly. I need you to understand what you're setting in motion. If what you've told me is accurate, your wife is facing federal charges. Immigration fraud, wire fraud, possibly money laundering. We're talking about years in federal prison. And her partner, this David Lawrence, he's looking at even more time if he's the one creating the fraudulent documents. I understand. Do you? Because once we move on this, there's no taking it back. Your family will be affected. Your daughters will know their mother is a criminal. You'll likely lose assets in civil forfeiture. This will be public, it will be messy, and it will change everything. I met her eyes. It already has. She studied me for a long moment, and I wondered what she saw. A man seeking justice, revenge, or just someone who'd discovered that the person sleeping beside him was a stranger and couldn't live with that knowledge. All right, Walsh said finally. Agent Brooks, please retrieve the documents from Mr. Holloway's vehicle. Mr. Holloway, I need you to walk me through every detail you can remember about yesterday. Times, names, everything you heard. We're going to be here for a while. The federal agents arrested Jessica on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd walked into that bedroom and found David Lawrence sitting across from my wife. 7 days that had transformed me from a husband into a witness, from a partner into a prosecution asset. I wasn't there when they came for her. Agent Walsh had ultimately convinced me that being present would serve no purpose except my own need for closure, and that my daughters needed me more. So I was at Emma's school, sitting in a parent-teacher conference about her photography project, when Jessica was taken into custody at her pharmaceutical company office. They'd waited until she was at work, away from our home and our children. Professional courtesy, Walsh called it. My phone buzzed during the conference. A text from Walsh. Subject in custody. Partner apprehended in Richmond. Warrants executed on all known office locations. I excused myself from the meeting, walked to my truck, and sat in the school parking lot for 20 minutes. It was done. The machinery of federal justice had engaged, and there was no stopping it now. David Lawrence, whose real name turned out to be Daniel Ortega, with warrants in 3 states for various fraud schemes, was arrested simultaneously at a consultation office in Richmond. Patricia Vance, the USCIS employee whose credentials he'd been using, was also taken into custody. She claimed she'd been manipulated, that Daniel had seduced her and stolen her access credentials. The federal prosecutor wasn't buying it. She'd received over $40,000 in payments from New Horizons accounts. The news broke that evening. Major immigration fraud ring dismantled, read the Charlotte Observer headline. The story detailed the scope. 437 families defrauded, over $2 million collected, operations spanning 5 states. Jessica's name appeared in the 3rd paragraph, identified as the primary operator of New Horizons Immigration Services. By morning, it was national news. I told Emma and Lily that night, sitting in our living room with the television off and the world pressing in from all sides. I'd rehearsed various approaches, consulted with a child psychologist Walsh had recommended, read articles about how to discuss parental incarceration with children. None of it prepared me for the reality of watching my daughters' faces as I explained that their mother had been arrested for crimes against families like their friends' families, like the parents of kids they went to school with. Emma cried. Lily went silent, retreating into herself in a way that terrified me more than tears would have. I held them both and promised things I wasn't sure I could deliver. that we'd be okay, that I'd take care of them, that this didn't change how much their mother loved them. That last promise felt like ash in my mouth. Did Jessica love them? She'd risked everything, their stability, their home, their future, for money and whatever satisfaction came from running a criminal enterprise. What kind of love was that? The legal proceedings moved with bureaucratic inevitability. Jessica was released on bond, forbidden from contacting any of her former clients or leaving the state. She moved in with her sister in Raleigh. I filed for divorce the same day, citing the standard irreconcilable differences, though the reality was far more specific. I'd discovered my wife was a federal criminal who'd been lying to me for years. The divorce was uncontested. Jessica's attorney, a public defender, since her assets had been frozen pending the criminal case, advised her not to fight it. We divided our possessions with the cold efficiency of strangers. She took her clothes, some furniture, personal items. I kept the house, primary custody of the girls, and the life we'd built together, now hollowed out and strange. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with a notebook, watching Jessica at the defense table. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident woman who'd run a multi-state fraud operation had been replaced by someone who kept her eyes down, who flinched when the prosecutor detailed the scope of her crimes. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They had the documents I'd provided, the bank records, testimony from Patricia Vance, who'd taken a plea deal, and most damaging of all, testimony from the families Jessica had defrauded. One by one, they took the stand and described their desperation, their hope, their trust in the woman who'd promised them safety. The Mendoza family testified. Rosa Mendoza wept as she described saving for 18 months to afford Jessica's fee, described the relief she'd felt receiving those documents, described the terror when immigration officials informed her they were forgeries. Her husband testified about the debt they'd gone into, the jobs they'd lost when they had to move suddenly after their fake documents raised red flags. Jessica never looked at them. She stared at the table, at her hands, anywhere but at the faces of the people she'd victimized. Daniel Ortega had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Jessica in exchange for a reduced sentence. He described the operation in clinical detail, how they'd recruited clients through community organizations, how they'd created the forgeries, how they'd split the profits. He portrayed himself as the technical expert and Jessica as the mastermind, the one who'd built the business model and expanded it across state lines. I don't know if that was true. Maybe they'd been equal partners. Maybe Daniel was lying to save himself. It didn't matter. The jury convicted Jessica on all counts: immigration fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison. 8 years. Emma would be 20 when her mother was released. Lily would be 17. I watched Jessica's face as the sentence was read. She didn't cry, didn't react at all, really. Just stood there as the bailiff approached to take her into custody, as her attorney whispered something I couldn't hear, as the life she'd built, both the legitimate one and the criminal one, collapsed completely. Our eyes met for just a moment before they led her away. I don't know what she saw in my expression. I don't know what I saw in hers. Recognition, maybe? Or just the acknowledgement that we'd both made choices that had brought us to this moment, and there was no undoing any of it. The aftermath was complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. The immigrant families Jessica had defrauded were now in federal databases, their information exposed through the investigation. Some were placed in deportation proceedings. Others, like the Mendoza family, qualified for U visas as victims of crime and were able to pursue legitimate immigration relief. But many simply disappeared, going deeper underground, more fearful than before. I thought about that often. My decision to report Jessica had been meant to protect those families, to stop the fraud, but the investigation had exposed them to exactly the kind of scrutiny they'd been trying to avoid. Some were deported. Children were separated from parents. Lives were disrupted in ways that couldn't be undone. Agent Walsh told me not to blame myself. They were already at risk, she said. The fake documents would have been discovered eventually, probably in worse circumstances. At least this way, some of them qualified for victim protections. I wanted to believe her. I'm still not sure I do. The civil forfeiture case recovered about $600,000 from various accounts, far less than the $2 million Jessica and Daniel had collected, but enough to provide some restitution to the victims. Each family received a fraction of what they'd paid, processed through a victim compensation fund. It wasn't justice, but it was something. Emma and Lily adjusted in the way children do, which is to say they carried scars that would shape them in ways I couldn't predict. Emma threw herself into photography, spending hours alone with her camera, creating images of fractured light and shadow that her art teacher called remarkably mature for her age. Lily became quieter, more watchful. She asked me once if I'd known what Mom was doing, if I'd been part of it. The question broke something in me. No, I told her. I didn't know. And when I found out, I had to make a choice about what to do with that knowledge. Did you make the right choice? She asked. I still don't have an answer to that question. We sold the house 18 months after Jessica's conviction. Too many memories, too many rooms that echoed with the life we'd had before. I bought a smaller place in a different school district, let the girls redecorate their rooms however they wanted, tried to build something new from the wreckage. Jessica writes letters from federal prison. They come every few weeks, addressed to the girls, full of apologies and explanations and promises about who she'll be when she's released. Emma reads them and doesn't respond. Lily keeps them in a box under her bed. I don't tell them what to do with their mother's words. That's their choice to make. I've been asked, by therapists and lawyers, and the few friends who stuck around through all of this, whether I regret reporting Jessica, whether I wish I'd handled it differently, confronted her privately, given her a chance to turn herself in, protected my daughters from the public spectacle of their mother's trial and conviction. The honest answer is, I don't know. I know that 437 families were defrauded, that 2,000 people were sold false hope and real danger. I know that some of them are better off because the fraud was exposed, and some are worse off. I know that my daughters lost their mother to federal prison, and that loss has shaped them in ways both visible and hidden. I know that the woman I married was capable of looking desperate people in the eye and lying to them for profit, repeatedly, for years. And I know that I was capable of living beside her, sharing meals and a bed and the mundane intimacy of marriage without seeing what she was. What I learned in the end is that we're all capable of more than we think, more deception, more cruelty, more self-justification. Jessica convinced herself she was helping people, that her services were valuable, that the families would have been worse off without her intervention. Maybe she even believed it. People are remarkably good at constructing narratives that cast themselves as the protagonist, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. I constructed my own narrative, too. The wronged husband, the protective father, the man who chose principle over comfort. But the truth is messier. I reported Jessica because I was angry, because I felt betrayed, because I wanted her to face consequences for lying to me. The immigrant families were real victims, and their suffering mattered. But they weren't why I made that call to the ICE tip line. I made it because my wife had built a secret life that excluded me, and I couldn't tolerate that exclusion. We tell ourselves stories about justice and morality, about doing the right thing regardless of personal cost. But most of us, most of the time, are motivated by smaller, more selfish impulses. We want revenge. We want validation. We want the people who've hurt us to acknowledge that hurt and suffer for it. I got what I wanted. Jessica is in prison. The fraud operation is dismantled. The truth is public and documented and undeniable. And I'm here, in a house that's too quiet, raising two daughters who are learning earlier than they should have that the people you trust most can be strangers. That love isn't always enough. That sometimes there are no good choices. Only different kinds of damage. Emma is 17 now, preparing for college. She wants to study photojournalism, to document truths that people would rather ignore. I see the connection to what happened with her mother, though she's never made it explicit. Lily is 14, still quiet, still watchful. She volunteers at an immigrant services organization, helping families navigate the legal system. She doesn't talk about why. I coach soccer for a different team now, in a different league. I manage construction projects. I date occasionally, though I haven't gotten serious with anyone. The women I meet ask about my ex-wife eventually, and I tell them a version of the truth, that she was convicted of fraud, that we divorced, that it's complicated. Most don't ask for details. The ones who do rarely call again. I visit Jessica once a year, on the anniversary of her arrest. I'm not sure why I maintain this ritual. Maybe because the girls need to know their parents can be civil, that whatever happened between us doesn't have to poison everything. Maybe because some part of me still needs to understand how the woman I married became the woman who ran New Horizons Immigration Services. We sit across from each other in the visiting room, and we talk about nothing important. How the girls are doing in school. Whether Emma will get into her first-choice college. The weather. The prison food. We don't talk about the trial, or the families, or the choices that brought us both to this place. There doesn't seem to be any point. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never come home early that Tuesday afternoon. If the meeting hadn't been canceled, if I'd never walked into that bedroom, if I'd remained ignorant for another month or year or decade. Would Jessica still be operating New Horizons? Would the number of defrauded families have reached 1,000? 2,000? Or would she have eventually stopped on her own, satisfied her need for whatever the business provided? Money, power, the thrill of deception? Would she have confessed, sought redemption, tried to make amends? I'll never know. None of us get to see the alternate versions of our lives, the roads not taken. We only get the reality we've created through our choices, and we have to live in it. The girls will be okay, I think. They're resilient in ways I couldn't have predicted, strong in ways I hope they never have to test further. They've learned that families can fracture, that parents can fail, that trust once broken doesn't fully repair. These are hard lessons, but maybe necessary ones. Maybe they'll be more careful with their own trust as a result. Maybe they'll be better judges of character than their father was. Or maybe they'll just carry different scars than I did and make different mistakes and find their own ways to live with the consequences. If there's a moral to this story, it's not a comfortable one. It's not about the triumph of justice or the importance of truth. It's about the fact that doing the right thing, if that's even what I did, doesn't erase the damage. It doesn't restore what was lost or heal what was broken. Sometimes it just trades one kind of pain for another, one set of victims for a different set. I think about the Mendoza family often. Rosa and her husband, their 3 children. They were granted U visas, allowed to stay, given a path to legal status. That's a good outcome, the kind Agent Walsh pointed to when she talked about the investigation's success. But they also lost $5,000 they couldn't afford to lose, spent months in fear of deportation, had their lives disrupted and examined and exposed. Are they better off than they would have been if I'd never made that call? I genuinely don't know. What I do know is this. Marriage is supposed to be a sanctuary, but it's built by human beings, and human beings are capable of remarkable deception, of others and of themselves. We construct elaborate fictions about who we are and what we're capable of, and we believe those fictions with absolute conviction right up until the moment reality forces us to see clearly. Jessica believed she was helping people. I believed I was protecting them. We were both right, and we were both wrong, and the truth is somewhere in the complicated middle where most truth lives. I'm not the man I was before I walked into that bedroom 5 years ago. That man believed in certainty, in clear moral lines, in the fundamental knowability of the people closest to him. This man knows better. This man understands that we're all strangers to each other in some essential way, that the person sleeping beside you contains multitudes you'll never fully access, that love and trust are acts of faith rather than certainty. It's not a comforting realization, but it's an honest one. Emma graduates next month. She's been accepted to 3 journalism programs, all of them far from Charlotte. She'll leave, and she should leave, and I'll be here with Lily for 3 more years before she leaves too. Then it will just be me, in a house that's too quiet, living with the consequences of choices I made when I thought I was pursuing justice. I don't regret those choices exactly, but I don't celebrate them either. They were what they were, the actions of a man who discovered a truth he couldn't ignore and responded in the only way he knew how. Whether that makes me principled or vengeful or just human, I'll leave for others to decide. What I know is that the life I thought I had was an illusion, and the life I have now is real, and real is harder but more honest. My daughters know their parents are flawed human beings rather than infallible authorities. They know that justice is complicated and consequences ripple outward in unpredictable ways. They know that sometimes there are no good choices, only different kinds of damage. These are hard truths to learn at 12 and 9, at 17 and 14. But they're true nonetheless. And in the end, truth was what I chose. Not comfort, not family unity, not the preservation of a beautiful illusion. Truth with all its complications and costs and consequences. I'm still not sure if that was the right choice. But it was mine, and I have to live with it. We all do.